When Robert Price got hit by a snowball.
All right.
Hey, guys.
It's a single class. A junior class. And they outnumber us dramatically.
All right. We are going to start working with series today. Like I said yesterday, sequences are a minute part of this entire
Are we
chapter.
using imaginary numbers?
No.
Good.
Yes.
Does Calc involve imaginary numbers eventually?
No.
Yeah.
Not for us, no.
But next year.
But why do I have that up there?
I ate some pie.
Okay. Waiting for you to catch up so then I can move on. Okay. A series is the sum of a sequence. A series is the sum of a sequence. I need you to know that. Notice how we're going from 1 to infinity. Okay. So a series is going to be infinite unless it's not, and we call it a partial sum. Cheers, go. Okay, over the next 2 weeks, we are going to learn a series of tests, series of tests that will help us determine whether an infinite series converges or diverges.
It's currently clear at 53 degrees in Pavilion.
Hey,
Expect
Siri.
partly cloudy skies
Hey,
starting
Siri.
tonight.
So over the next 2 weeks, as we talk about
Hey Siri.
my Siri will think that I'm talking to him. So
Hey Siri.
well, mine works well apparently.
Hey Siri. Hey Siri.
Stop.
Siri.
It's a function you can turn on.
Siri.
But it drains your battery quite a bit.
Siri. You must have said it weird. Hey Siri. Mine is on, so this can do it.
Anyway, over the next 2 weeks, I will teach you different tests
Yeah.
to determine whether a series converges or not. Today we are going to talk about 1,
Hey Siri.
2, 3 of them. Okay? You'll notice on your gold sheet that in a couple weeks we'll have a test over series convergence. You got a test, a quiz, excuse me. That'll be a pretty important quiz. Okay? All right. So, the first one is this.
Okay, February 13th.
February 13th on here.
And just like look at it for sure.
First of all, if the sequence of partial sums of a series converges, then we say that the series converges. Okay? So, in other words, if we can determine what the limit of the partial sum is, and when I say partial sum, it literally means n, then that is what the series converges to. I will tell you right now, we can rarely use this one because this would involve us actually calculating the partial sum in terms of n. That's not going to happen very often. There's one particular case that it will happen in, and that's what we're going to go over, and I'll tell you the name of the case.
Okay, split your
My reader sucks.
No, like the moving some sunlight. Really? You can't do this? One goes down. You're not like straight out. One goes down.
You guys have this all written down?
I do stuff sometimes.
We found out that Isaac sucks so much. Again.
Did you do something in physics?
Yep.
Yeah. A 30-foot straw.
Is this where the how many holes does a straw have conversation stem from?
No. Mr. Marsh got mad.
Nah, it's got two.
How long can the straw be before you can't drink from it?
I'm guessing 30 feet.
33.
You close.
You or anybody?
Anybody.
Okay.
Ever.
All right, go ahead and write this series down.
We're doing a
Just terrible. Okay. Now, when we talk about the limit of the partial sum, I'm not talking about 1 over k minus 1 over k plus 1. I'm talking about what is the nth partial sum. Find that limit. Okay? So, when we actually find the nth partial sum, that means we're taking the sum from k equals 1 to n of 1 over k minus 1 over k plus 1. Let's talk about that. First term would be what? When you plug in 1, what's the first term?
1 minus 1/2.
1 minus 1/2. Plus the second term.
1/2 minus 1/3.
Plus the next term.
1/3 minus 1/4.
Do you see a pattern?
Yeah.
Plus, okay, dot, 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 all the way until our nth term would be 1 over n minus 1 over n plus 1. Okay?
0 minus 0.
False. Negative 1/2 plus 1/2. Negative 1/3 plus 1/3.
So
The 1/4 will cancel all the way up until
I'm not going on the
all the way up until 1 over n,
Whoa.
right? So what do we have left? We have 1 minus 1 over n plus 1. Is it? Okay. You have an advanced mind. Okay. So what this says is if we can find the nth partial sum and take the limit, that's what our infinite series will converge to. So we found the nth partial sum. If we take the limit of the nth partial sum, what is it?
1.
no.
So we know that this series converges. This is one of 2 tests that actually can tell us what it converges to. Since the limit is 1, we know it converges to 1. This is something that we call a telescoping series. Why would it be called the telescoping series? Why does that make sense? Okay. Well, kind of like it spirals, right? Like these cancel, these cancel, these cancel, and then you get it, you whittle it down to just those 2 terms. Okay. This is one example of a telescoping series. There are others where this same pattern ensues. Okay. Like I said, we cannot use this test very often. It's really only the telescoping series that we can do it on, okay? I really need to reiterate that we can only take the limit if we know the nth partial sum. And the only time we can find the nth partial sum is when we have a telescoping series for those terms that cancel out. Okay. Okay. So what do we do if it's not? We have a lot of other tests. So let's talk about a test that you actually know and you've known since Algebra 2.
No.
Please don't be it.
No. On.
What is
Oh, wait, no.
Yarn.
On.
You know yarn.
Okay. You saw it in your other classes as this. Those two mean the same thing.
Earning. It's a journey to earning.
What a day.
This is right. Let's call it one.
But we all said it at the same time before.
Oh, man. No more calling.
Did those get wet?
We're calling it
Yeah.
a day.
I spilled my 48 ounces of water.
Is that one of your goals?
Yep.
Mistakes are
To
valuable.
not name things anymore?
No more calling it a day.
Math is a
All right, so let's talk about, do you remember from Algebra 2 pre-calc what the requirements are for this to converge?
No.
Well, why does it start at
So which
If-
one should we recognize?
Probably both, because you're going to see it in both ways. And I don't know if you remember me talking yesterday. A sequence has a domain of positive integers. The geometric sequence, however, will sometimes start at 0. What did you say, Isaac?
I wish I would always seen it,
Okay. Okay. Now, we actually know what it converges to if this stipulation is met, because R can be negative. It is fine for R to be negative, but the absolute value of R, if it is less than 1, then it is going to converge to A over 1 minus R, where A is the first term. Now, I encourage you to be very careful with using this, because not always will these series begin at 0 or 1. I have seen geometric series to begin at 2, which means this guy right here isn't necessarily A, it's whatever you get when you plug in your first term, your first guy. Now, when we plug in 0 to this sequence, we get A. When we plug in 1 to this sequence, we get A. However, if your series does not begin at 0 or 1, you will need to be careful with this, and we'll look more at that on Monday. Okay? All right, so let's look at an example. Are you ready? Please write this down. Where's the game from?
A little bit better. much more than.
All right. Is this a geometric series, and how do we recognize a geometric series?
Well, it's adding to its own sequence.
Okay, well, we're adding terms, so it's a series. How do we know it's geometric? We're multiplying by the same number over and over. And that's what R is. R is the number that we're multiplying by over and over and over again. Okay? So, what are we multiplying by each time? 2/5. So this is the sum from n equals 0 to infinity of 3 times 2/5 to the n. 3 is our first term, and then we multiply by 2/5 from term to term to term to term. Okay? So I ask you this. Is the absolute value of R less than or equal to 1? Okay. So we know that this converges because it's a geometric series where the absolute value of R is less than 1. Okay? Anytime you tell me if a series converges or diverges, you need to tell me how you know. If we can find the sum, then we need to do that. This is the second type of test where we can actually figure out what it converges to. Okay? A over 1 minus R is how we determine that. Five? This converges
Old times today.
to 5.
And your birth.
18 minutes. Okay? If R, the absolute value of R is greater than or equal to 1, you would say that the series diverges. Okay, it's as simple as that. If it converges, we can find what it converges to. Okay.
What happens if it diverges but you put in A over 1 minus R?
Then you'll get a number, but it means nothing. You know what I mean?
Numbers are meaningless.
Okay. Are you guys okay with the idea of an infinite sum converging?
Yes,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Okay. Do you remember the door example?
Functions are weird.
But what?
The door
If you're
example.
running halfway to the door.
So,
Yeah.
me to the door, I cut my distance in half. I cut my distance in half. I cut my distance in half.
Yeah,
I
I get
cut
that.
my distance in half. Am I ever going to make it to the door?
No.
No, but am I going to be like at the door?
Thanks very much.
That's what converging would be like. Okay.
Approaching.
I know that this is not the first test that I presented to you, but it is the first test that we need to think of if we do not recognize a telescoping or a geometric series. Okay? In my mind, a telescoping series should be easy to pick out because we're subtracting two fractions and we have those numbers cancel out. A geometric series should be easy to pick out because it's a times r to a power. It's an exponential function, right? Here's our nth term test. If a series, and I don't know why there's a comma there, it shouldn't be there. If a series converges, then the limit is 0. If the sum of a sequence converges, then the limit of the sequence is 0. Write it down. turn to your neighbor, because you only have one neighbor. What would the contrapositive be? Flashback Friday.
Be serious.
I have had one duo actually talk about this.
We don't know.
Then guess.
Infinity.
One.
Divergent.
So this is if A, then B. Contrapositive.
Oh.
Okay, so this is if A, then B. Contrapositive would be what?
If B, then A.
So it,
Contra.
A to not B.
If not A, then not B.
If not A,
If
then
not
B.
B, then not A.
If not A, then B.
If not,
What is this, in English?
If A and B, then C.
equals C.
This is from,
What?
we like this English class less than old English class.
Oh, yeah.
It's way worse.
I'm not sure if I'm the Anderson there.
We'll chat later.
Okay.
If A, then B. Contrapositive. If not B, then not A. If the limit of the sequence is not 0, then the sum will not converge. We don't say that though, we say diverge. Okay, that's the nth term test that we're going to use. If, and this is what you should consider no matter what. Is the limit of the sequence 0? If the answer is no, it automatically diverges and it's no use trying anything else. Okay, so this is a starting point. Okay. Okay. I have 3 examples on the board coming next.
Ms. Holman,
What?
do you know
Yes.
what a normal number of English credits are required in college?
For us.
It depends on the school. Sometimes 3 years, sometimes 4 years.
Years?
Yeah, so 8 credits.
In college. What do we
Oh.
have to take in college?
No, 2 semesters. Times 1, times 2.
Yes.
Okay.
We can.
Did you write this down?
Trade school it is.
I had my English credits done before I went to college.
I probably
There's a community college in my hometown, and so we could take classes there to count for high school credit. So I took English Composition 1 and English Composition
the
2
thing is, if you
at the
pick
community
engineering,
college.
we can take these special.
you can take
You
engineering.
can take engineering out of
Jake,
English.
You can take engineering English, like English
Specific
specifically
thing?
for engineering.
Yeah, that's a specific thing, where it's not like actual.
That's
I might
cool.
actually take that just to see like.
I don't know if
Okay. So what we can do is we can take the limit as n approaches infinity of n factorial over 3n factorial plus 2. What the heck, Mrs. Homan?
Whoa.
What kind of limit is this?
Yeah.
We don't. Well, it feels like that would be infinity. And now those infinities are infinity.
Okay, but think about the degree. The degree of the numerator compared to the degree of the denominator would be. Okay, you're a step ahead of me.
Same.
The same, okay? And if the degrees are the same, then the limit would be,
1/3.
whew,
1/3.
which is
Not 0.
not 0. So this diverges because of the nth term test.
We're doing
I
now.
remember what that's called.
What?
I'm not gonna remember what that's called. And then it'll be weird.
The nth term test?
Yeah.
We
I'd be
have to
like,
say why?
oh, we have to remember
Yes.
what it's called. And then,
Aw.
and then I'll be like, what is it?
This is like back to geometry when you just proofs.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to laugh.
Who was that?
What?
Those blocks.
What happened?
Josh Bucking noise.
I feel like we're like the most like
Blocks.
ADHD class.
I'm going to tell you how many tests there are, but now I can't.
Are we used to this class?
Eventually, there will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different tests.
We have to know 10.
So yes, you do have to tell me why.
So it's like proofs again.
Next example. It's not like proofs. You're not writing me a
Exactly
proof.
like proof.
It is not.
We have to
know
tell you
all
why.
that and say why.
It's a one-step thing here today,
The
buddy.
one step.
After you finish the problem.
It's still a proof.
Remember in proofs where you like had to go from, well, these are angular, like angled differences. Now you have to like make it equal to.
After
It's
I'm
an
done
angle
with this, I'm
measure
gonna
or
write a
something.
vertical angle test. And it'll be exactly like geometry.
Mm,
Every
There's
problem
no
has
such
vertical
thing
angles.
as vertical angle.
Not yet.
Okay, do you have this one written down?
Yeah.
No.
Thoughts?
Let's plug in infinity.
Yes, it's vertical.
Vertical
And you
angle.
get affinity.
Square.
What? What do you mean the infinite Roman?
I don't even know.
R being the three.
Yeah, telescoping. There's a second.
Okay, so this is a geometric series is what you're telling me.
Learn more.
Okay, this is a geometric series and the R value is what?
Greater than one.
Okay, so the absolute value of R is greater than 1. So it diverges Thank you. No, it was a sneeze. I thought I had another one. Okay. Right in the middle.
It's a geometric series test, Jake.
Now, could you use the nth term test on this one?
Yeah.
What's the limit towards infinity of 3 to the n? Infinity, not 0, diverges by the nth term test. So there's not one right answer for this problem. You could do it 2 different ways. Now, some of you are going to see geometric series right away. Some of you are going to test nth term test first just because that's going to be your routine. I don't care. Tell me that it diverges and have a legitimate reason.
Or. Yes, ma'am.
And have a legitimate reason. That's
It
Okay.
just happens to line up.
Last one.
Divergent geometric series test. Or the odds.
Where's it?
You're pretty good right now.
Well, there's 3 tests that we learned about.
Oh, there's 3 times. 3 times. So 0.
Okay, so I told you you should always begin
Let's go for it.
with the nth term test. Right?
Yeah.
Limit as n approaches infinity of 1 over n equals 0. What does that tell us?
We have to do something else.
False.
It doesn't mean that. It says that's the second part of it.
We have to do another.
It just tells
We
you.
have to test
It just tells you. It just tells you that.
Okay. All we know is that the limit is 0. Let's think about logic here. If A, then B. If it rains, Mrs. Holman will wear a coat. If I do this, if Mrs. Holman wears a coat, then it will rain. Does that make sense? 100% of the time. No, we can't do that here, okay? Our statement was,
Series.
if the series converges, then the limit of the sequence is 0. All we know is that the limit of the sequence is 0. We can't go backwards, we don't know. Okay, so the nth term test is not effective here. We would have to use something different.
Telescope it.
How can we telescope it?
I don't know, you can't earn it though.
Periscope. Can't earn it.
One of those things.
This would be that's a 1. It's a 1. You know it's a 1. This would be the series. Can we telescope it? No, we don't have anything cancel out. So right now we're stuck
You know what happens in stats?
until Tuesday when
You
I
know what
tell
happens in
you.
stats if we can't do it? The problem's just over.
What did you say? Did you say that?
Well, in this case, it's over. To be continued.
Yeah, we're done.
This problem's not normal. We're out of here.
And with that, we may call it a day. Okay. Now,
So we know that it could converge.
but it's not guaranteed to converge. I'll tell you right now that it doesn't.